Hey, countdown to the Geekcast. This is Retro right here again. We have a phenomenal guest who is a writer, a letterer, editor. I mean, she's done everything in the industry from Dynamite to Marvel to, I mean, the list can go on. If you like Charm, she's done Charmed. If you like Xena, she's done Xena. I mean, she has done everything. Erica Schultz is on the fire right now because she's doing Rat City, Daredevil, Unleash Hell, Laura Kenny, Wolverine. I mean, those are characters that are really held dear to me. But before we get her in, I'm going to give a quick shout out to Dragon's Lair Alamo Ranch, and she loves comic book stores too. Dragon Lair Alamo Ranch is what gives us our cool reviews so we can review the comics and everything. And they are here in San Antonio, Texas. You can go if you're into D&D, Magic, Pokemon. That's a place you want to go. Erica,
Yes,
how are you doing?
still alive. Just
Okay.
sitting here weaving
How,
as I
okay,
go.
you're weavy, but how do you juggle these stories that you're writing? Like you're literally writing 3 books at one time. How do you do this?
I don't sleep a lot. Um, I have so I do a lot of writing analog. So I always have a notebook next to me, and um, and I will write an idea that will come to me no matter what. I will be driving down the highway and put my hazards on and pull over to write an idea.
Wow.
Um, and it could be an idea for something that I'm currently writing. It could be an idea for something that I've never written before. It can be an idea for something that I've thought about 7, 12 years ago, but it didn't have enough meat to actually like come to fruition, and this might be the missing piece. Yeah, but I write everything down. I write my lists of everything that I got to do. I write.
Wow.
Don't ever get on the phone with me because I take notes on all phone calls. So don't say that you said something. I will find out. I will tell you if you did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, because I mean, the stuff that you're currently writing, guys. If you don't know, okay, X-23. If you don't know her backstory, she's a phenomenal character. She first appeared in X-Men Evolution, then later on in NYX. These stories are great. But what we're getting right now from Erica is an older Laura Kenny, which is no longer X-23, um, basically learning how to adapt. Because that's the thing. If you look at it, I mean, this is how I see X-23. Like you mentioned before, she didn't have a childhood. She was trained an assassin. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, what they put her through basically as a little kid, as soon as she smelled a certain scent, she knew to attack or vice versa. I mean, it was just crazy. And right now, what you're between, when you had the crossover with Elektra and her, how did you come up? I mean, where did you, because most people who write in certain comics aren't fans, but you are a fan. So you could see the passion that you put into these 2 characters because you can see it when you're writing. When you got this job for X-23, first of all, how was it? Like when you
Well,
landed it?
the first time I wrote Laura, I wrote her as X-23. Edgar Salazar was the artist, and it was
Yeah.
X-23 Deadly Regenesis, and it was 2023 was when that came out. That was the first time I wrote Laura. Um, when Marvel came back to me and said, "Hey, would you like to? We're lining up the X books post Krakoa. Would you like to maybe go back to Laura?" And I said, "Hell yeah." Um, and the X-23 Deadly Regenesis book that I did with Edgar was a matter of, it was taking place during the Utopia era.
Yeah.
So Laura was still very guarded. She had just finished a long stint on X-Force with Phantomax and Archangel and Logan, obviously, and Domino. That was I'm trying to think. I remember Rick Remender wrote it, but was it Jorge Fornes who drew it?
I think so.
And
Yeah, that was an awesome series as well.
that was a phenomenal run. So the X-23 Deadly Regenesis kind of comes out of that time period for Laura. But we're writing Laura now, and now she's older. She's between 21 and 22. She's living in the city, living in New York City. Um, and I've been that 21-year-old woman living and working in New York City. When I graduated college at 21, I got a job like 2 months out of college. I was very, very fortunate. And I got an apartment in Brooklyn not too long after that. Um, so there's a lot of figuring yourself out, whether you're a mutant who has an adamantium skeleton, or you're just a woman living in the city, trying to find yourself, trying to figure yourself out. And now, coupled with the whole fall of Krakoa and the anti-mutant sentiment that is going around, you not only have to find yourself, but you have to decide whether you're going to like stay hidden. Because Laura is very fortunate. She is a mutant who can pass. She can pass
Yeah.
for human. In the first issue of Laura Kinney Wolverine, Jada Belvisa, who's the artist, and Rochelle Rosenberg, who's the color artist, in the first issue, Laura meets a mutant who can't pass. She has purple skin. She
Yeah.
looks human, but she has purple skin. And she says, I don't have any special powers. I just look different. I look weird. I can't do anything special or cool. I'm just, somebody you look down the street and you know immediately they're different.
Yeah.
And there's this sort of back and forth where Laura has to kind of confront her hypocrisy to that. She wants to be mutant and proud, but when push comes to shove, she doesn't have to raise her hand and say I'm a mutant. She can stand in the crowd and nobody's gonna question her. So she was kind of dealing with that. And there was a young mutant that she met, a woman named Polly. And
Yeah.
Polly's mutant ability is to see mutants. So Polly will look out at a crowd, and everyone will look normal, except if you're a mutant. You almost look like you're in infrared.
Yeah. Like the Predator.
And, yeah, kind of like. But because she can see your X gene. And so Laura is minding her own business, and Polly walks up to her and says, like, hey, are you, I run a shelter for mutants. Are you here for refuge? And Laura's like, what are you I'm not a mutant. Like, what are you saying?
Yeah.
She's like, well, that's my mutant ability. I can see mutants. And I know you're a mutant because that is what I can do. I can see your X gene. And so Laura has to kind of confront that hypocrisy of being out and proud, but also understanding that not everybody is going to be that, rah, rah, I'm a mutant and I'm happy about it. Because
Yeah.
there is still a lot of anti-mutant sentiment, and there's anti-mutant violence that's going on and everything. In terms of linking up Laura and Elektra, that was kind of like a cheat code for me because I was finishing up writing Elektra doing, it was Daredevil Woman Without Fear. The trade paperback comes out tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I did that with Mike Dowling and Dee Knuth. And so that was cool. So I had Elektra's, and this was before I started on Unleash Hell. So I had Elektra's voice in my head, and I was like, man, I know Elektra and Laura are so similar, but I don't want to start getting their voices crossed over, and I don't want one to start sounding like the other. So what can I do to make this work? What can I do to separate them in my mind? And the best thing to do would be to play them off each other. Both assassins, both trained at young ages, both women, both underestimated, both overestimated, all these different things, both taking the mantle of a hero that
Yeah.
they are not the first version of that hero. And so when I was writing Elektra opposite Laura, I thought about, okay, well, there's the 21-year-old Erica who, was living in that tiny, crappy apartment in Brooklyn, working in Manhattan. What would 48-year-old Erica say to that Erica? You know, having lived through that, having had those experiences, how would I speak to my younger self, and how would my
Yeah.
younger self react? And that's kind of how I thought about it. Like Elektra treating Laura almost like Elektra is seeing herself in Laura.
Yeah.
And so there's this back and forth because Laura, of course, you know, when you're 21, you know everything, don't you know? Um, so, you know, Laura has that reaction of like, you know, don't tell me what to do, blah, blah, blah. And Electra's like, look, I've been the stubborn person like you. I've, I've been that stubborn, doesn't want to take any, any advice. I've been her. And you need to listen to me because I know a thing or two, kid. Um, excuse me. And so we get to sort of play off of that, and Laura's sort of a little better for it because she realizes, yeah, Electra's right. She knows what she's doing. She's no amateur. Um, and Electra straight up says to her, "You have a lot to learn. You got a lot to learn about being an adult. You got a lot to learn about being a hero. You got a lot to learn about dealing with people because Laura has this very very heated conversation with Luke Cage, who's the mayor." And, you know, Laura sort of throws in Cage's face like this idea of like, you sound like you're anti-mutant. And Cage is like, oh, I I've been on teams with mutants since before you were born.
Yeah.
And I'll go call your dad and tell him to pick your ass up because I'm not hearing this from a kid, hero or not. I'm not hearing it from a kid. So don't come here and tell me what I know and what I'm supposed to do. Like,
Yeah.
I've been at this hero game for a while now, kid. So you get to see Laura sort of stumble through things, and you get to see her start understanding things. But still, I mean, that idea of wanting to be mutant and proud, wanting to protect all the mutants, whether they want to be out or not, um, is something that Laura needs to finesse. She needs to learn a
Yeah.
bit more about. Um, and we're going to deal with that. Issue 4 comes out in about a week, and that's Laura and Bucky Barnes go on a
See,
road
and
trip.
and that's another thing. You're bringing Bucky Barnes into this. I mean, that's another awesome character that has had his time as well, and kind of the same thing. I mean, if you haven't read any of the comics and you only watch the movies, you know, there's more behind him that you know that he went through that you don't know.
Yeah,
Um, and that's the thing. You're putting these characters together that I think kind of have been through the same trials, you know, and I'm looking forward to see what you know they intercrop on this road trip. And
yeah. I mean, in the comics, um, Bucky had a younger sister named Rebecca, and depending on because there has been some kind of a little bits retcons here and there
yeah,
for Bucky. Um, you know, was he Bucky as a teenager or was he Bucky as a child? You know, and things like that. So no matter what, he did have a sister, and they actually brought that into the MCU in the Falcon and Winter Soldier um, series because when he's on that date with that woman from the restaurant,
yeah,
she asks him about his family, and he said, "I had a sister, but she passed. Like my parents have passed, my sister's passed." Um, and she makes a joke and asks him how old he is, and he's like 106. You know, so his sister Rebecca, his younger sister Rebecca, is somebody who they don't talk about much, but
yeah.
was always sort of close to him. So he looks at Laura as kind of a feral Becky, like
Oh, okay,
you
okay.
know, kind of like a feral version of his younger sister. And there's God, I wish I could share it. There are two scenes that Giada drew. Giada Belvise is the artist that when I wrote them, I chuckled. I thought that they were funny scenes written. And then the way Giada just drew them with the expressions and everything. I was just like, this is peak comics.
Wow.
Um, and there's one in issue 4, and there's actually no, there's 2 in issue 5 and 1 in issue 4, and both of them are like just I love them. I love them so much. I will probably say issues. I mean, I just finished writing issue 9 for Laura, and I
Dang.
will say issues 4 and 5 are probably close to my favorites. They probably are my favorites of writing them. I mean, I love where 6 and 7 went. I love where 8 is. I love 1. I obviously love Elektra. But I think 4 and 5, the back and forth between the two of them, because even though there's a lot of back and forth between Elektra and Laura, Laura is a bigger smartass with Bucky. And it is so perfect because he calls her out on it.
Nice.
He's like, shut up, know it all. Leave me alone. Stop. You're a smartass. Oh God, I want to say what it is. But there's this moment where like Bucky's like, I'm going to do X. And Laura's like, I've already done it. And Bucky's like, yeah, well, you're so cool, aren't you, kid? You know, it's just such a perfect situation. And I kind of pulled like a little bit of like I have a brother who's several years older than I am. And I kind of pulled a little bit of our like banter back and forth and like our, big brother, little sister kind of thing. And I throw that in there too, which is pretty fun. But yeah, I would say 4 and 5 are probably my favorites so far. And luckily 4 will be out next week. So
yeah, well, and that's the thing that we were talking about we started recording was, when you put your words on the paper and you're giving them to the artist, and how you said you give them references to what you have an idea of what you want. And that's the thing that I like about what I'm reading, because the way I read a comic, everybody does it different. Everybody reads the word bubbles first, and then they'll do the artwork. I take in the background first, and then I'll read. So as I'm reading the bubbles, I already have the full picture in my head as I'm reading.
They're balloons, not bubbles.
Balloons, yes. Sorry.
That's the letterer in me. That's the letterer in me.
But that's how I read my comics. And because as I'm reading it, I already have it in my head. And like certain things, like, okay, like when I read a Batman comic, Kevin Conroy's in the back of my head as I'm reading those words. And then seeing, like the X-23 character, and then the Elektra. Elektra had a great run in the 80s and stuff. And then right now I feel this is the Elektra we need in the MCU currently, because the way she is, the way she fights, just everything about her that you're writing, I feel I would love to see this type of character in the MCU, especially where they're going with the current live action Daredevil. And not only that, you're bringing. Go ahead.
The woman who played Elektra in the Netflix Daredevil series, she was really good, and she was a martial artist.
Yeah, she was good. Yes.
I don't know if they're going to bring her back for Born Again, because I think Born Again is going to be 2 or 3 seasons. Yeah. I don't know if they have a plan of bringing her back, but I thought she was phenomenal. I thought that she, not only did she embody the physicality of the character, but she also had like the sensuality, but also kind of that like smart ass kind of, jokes kind of thing. And, she would like tease Matthew and things like that. So if they're bringing, it seems as if they're bringing everybody from the Netflix series back. So if that's the case, then I highly suggest they bring her back, because I would love to see her in the Daredevil costume. That would be, my mind would be blown. That would be amazing.
Well, you're currently writing, the Muse is, of course, introduced into, Unleash Hell, and it's a different version of Muse. And if you guys haven't read that issue, that Charles Soule wrote back in the day, it is a great read, especially for what he does. And of course, we're hopefully going to see in the live action, but this version that you're writing is a different version, and even that in itself, I feel it has a different, unique twist to it, and the way you're presenting it, and I'm looking forward to what's going to happen because it's leaving you kind of like, okay, what, you know what I mean? Like what the heck, like what the hell's going on? You know?
Yeah, Muse himself actually died in 2015, 2016 in the comics.
Yeah.
Um, and so this version of Muse, um, we open up Unleash Hell with this with the question of why is Hell's Kitchen called Hell's Kitchen? Like who came up with it? And I like to, because I grew up in and around New York City. I like New York City history. I love the fact that New York City is 400 odd years old.
Yeah.
I love the fact that, I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to New York City, but like you can literally tell when from Midtown going downtown, you can literally tell when the old city happens because like the streets are still cobblestone in some places.
Oh
And
wow.
there's just like, I can't describe it, but there's this thing. And I did it in Rat City as well, where I went through the history. For Rat City #6, I literally go through the history of the Bowery. And I talk about Peter Stuyvesant. I talk about the Dutch that came and colonized New York City or New Amsterdam at the time. I talk about the native indigenous tribes that were there, the Lenape that were there prior to the Dutch showing up.
Wow.
And I go through literally like the entire history of the Bowery, because Rat City is a section of the Bowery. And I did that with this version of Unleash Hell, where the opening of the first issue is this idea of where did Hell's Kitchen get its name? You know, like who came up with that? And there was a historical figure named Dutch Fred, excuse me. And like when you look up why does Hell's Kitchen have that name, it's this like legend of Dutch Fred. So I threw that in there. Like, could it be because of Dutch Fred? Was it the biker gang? Was it an Irish biker gang in the early 1900s? Like all these different things, and we sort of go through, and then and then sort of the narration then gets into, no matter what the purpose, no matter what, who came up with Hell's Kitchen, it's called Hell's Kitchen because you're so close to evil that you can smell what the devil's cooking.
Oh damn.
And we talk about, what ley lines are.
Yeah, a little bit, not too familiar.
It's this belief that there are certain points on the earth, that there's these basically like almost like longitudinal, latitudinal lines that when things cross, there's like it's a spiritual point, like almost like a
Oh,
nexus
okay,
kind
yes,
of thing.
okay, I know what you're talking about. Yes, now.
So I talk about like, is Hell's Kitchen along a ley line? Like, is that what makes it so, spooky and eerie and things like that?
Okay, I got you. Like the Hellmouth for Buffy, kind of.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
got you. Okay.
Although there is a place in New York City called Hell's Gate.
You see, and that's the thing. Okay, guys, if you didn't know this, she's actually putting history stuff into these comics that we, as me, didn't know,
Yeah.
and I would have just been reading and thinking, "Oh, this is cool," but you're actually putting actual history stuff in these comics. That is some crazy stuff.
Yeah, like there is a place, North Manhattan, Queens area called Hell's Gate. Why is it called Hell's Gate? Like all those kinds of things. And there's another character that comes in, and issue #3 is coming out tomorrow, so people can read it. There's another character who comes in who mentions Hell's Gate and says,
Dang.
everybody thinks the opening to Hell is in Hell's Gate. It's not. It's in Hell's Kitchen.
Dang.
Okay. So yeah, so I'm putting some real New York history into it, just because
that is awesome.
Like my parents were from Manhattan and the Bronx. Like I I lived in New York. I had friends in New York. We hung out. My husband lived there, after college and stuff. So I worked there for, you know, 15, almost 20 years, so it's a matter of like, I think every story that I tell, whether it's Rat City or one of my creator owned books like Forgotten Home or Deadliest Bouquet or whatever, every story has a small autobiographical piece of me, whether it's the
Nice.
location, whether it's the situation, whether it's the emotional situation that's going on. So, like Deadliest Bouquet, which is an Image book that came out a couple of years ago, that's a story about three sisters
Yeah.
uh, who are estranged. And when their mother is murdered, they come back together and they have to. And there's this, craziness where like their mom used to be a Nazi hunter and she taught them how to be assassins. So there's a lot of like aggro energy going through. But this idea of three siblings coming together and having to deal with a difficult situation, having to deal with the death of a parent, and they each had different relationships with the parent. Some of them, and the whole thing, like there's this great line in Goodfellas where it's like the second somebody dies, they automatically become a saint. You know what I mean? So this idea of like, well, you and mom were always so close. No, we weren't. Yeah, you were. I mean, the way she treated me versus the way she treated you, like everybody has their own version of the same story, and none of them are 100% true.
Yeah.
So when my dad passed in 2016, my brother, my sister, and I had to have these conversations, and it was very much like that. Like, well, why do you get this, or why are you doing this, or blah blah blah, or it's your responsibility to do X, Y, Z kind of thing because you were the favorite of this, that, and the next thing. And it's just so. I took a lot of that, and I put that into that story,
Wow.
to the point where when my brother read it, he's like, these are verbatim conversations that we had. I was like, no, they're not. I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, Erica, I remember these. He's like, you probably took this directly from our text messages. Like, come on, But
Oh man.
there are these moments of autobiography in it because anybody who's doing anything creative, whether you're doing it on purpose or not, you're putting yourself in there. You're putting your experience,
Yeah.
your biases even into that. And I think that when a creator allows themselves to do that, I think it enriches the story so much more because
Yeah, it
the
does.
audience feels like this is real. Yeah, you're talking about people with, adamantium skeletons and things like, this stuff that's like really out there. But the fact that you can feel that the story with Laura is about a young woman living in New York City trying to find her way. I was that young woman living in New York City trying to find my way. Giada doesn't live in New York, but Giada's a young woman who's living in a big city in Italy, trying to work through life and just figure out who you are and where you fit. And we're putting that in. I think that the audience can feel that, and I think that brings the audience closer to the characters. And I think, like we were talking before off mic, this idea of like escapism through comics,
Yeah.
I think that sort of heightens the escapism and makes it feel a little more real,
Yes.
you know?
Well, I mean, you mentioned, like, I'll be honest with you, if I hadn't known, I would just if the New York stuff, the historic stuff, I know you research when you do your stuff, you research your stuff, but
Yeah.
if I knew all that was actual history stuff, now that I do, I see it different now because I thought it was just a cool read that because some people make stuff up and they'll say like, oh, this happened, blah blah blah, but it's not reality. But of course, we don't know this. But now knowing that you're actually putting actual historic stuff there, man, it
It
just blew my mind. Like, wow,
For Rat City, I go up to the factual stuff of Rat City goes up to about 2015.
wow,
Everything off because the Rat City takes place in 2111. So when
yeah,
they talk about like 2035, that's stuff that we made up. And we talk in we say when we're going through the different decades and we go into the 90s, the 1990s, we talk about how like there's this like vigilante living in Rat City,
Yeah.
but nobody's caught him on camera, or there's like shaky steady cam. And we have an interview with Bobby and Bootsy, who are two characters that lived with Al Simmons. They were two of the unhoused men who lived with Al Simmons in Rat City. But yeah, talking about like I didn't want to get sued by CBGBs,
Yeah.
so it's BCGB. So we swapped the letters, but when you look at it, you're like that's CBGBs. So we talk about CBGBs being like the place for all of these acts, through the 70s, the 80s, and beyond. We talk about because CBGBs is in the Bowery.
Yeah.
We talk about how it closed and how like that put like a huge damper on the vibe of the area and things like that. So we talk about all of that. That is all history, like
Wow.
legit
That's
history.
crazy.
It
And
took me issue number 6, I'm not lying. Issue number 6 took me almost 6 weeks to write, and this is
wow.
the reason, because I was watching documentaries and I was taking notes and I was watching everything that I could find. I saw there were 3 student films that were put up on YouTube, and there was a student film done in the 1960s,
Whoa.
and it was put up on YouTube, and it was phenomenal in the sense that it got to the heart of the Bowery. It got to the people that lived there and everything. And some of the stories that these people were telling were absolutely heartbreaking. Absolutely. Like, and so we have one page in issue number 6, and it's a 12 panel grid. And I very, very rarely write more than 6 panels on a page. Very rarely,
Oh
because
damn.
I know how tough the artist works. But it's literally 12, like 4 shots, 4 rows of 3 of portraits of these men, because only men lived in the Bowery. That was an interesting thing. Is like if you were a woman down on your luck, you would go uptown and you would, work the oldest profession. Men of didn't have as much of an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
So all these men lived down on the Bowery, and they all had substance abuse issues. Um, so we have these 12 portraits of these 12 different men, and they're all like the interviewer asked every single one of them the same question, like, how do you like it down at the Bowery? And some are like, I love it. But I mean, they were obviously inebriated, and others are like, it's the worst thing ever. I want to go home and everything. And so we just have these images, and I took screen caps of these men, and I sent them to Jay, and I said, look, obviously don't copy them exactly because these are real people,
Yeah.
but you can see in their eyes how tired they are. You can see, I mean, there's some people that you watch still had hope. There's some people that you watch, you don't
Just
know if they were going to walk in traffic the next day,
wow.
you know? So it took me 5.5, almost 6 weeks to write that issue, because I would watch all these documentaries. I would take notes watching the documentaries. I would, um, and some of these things were incredibly obscure, like a 25-minute student film that was done, you know, but it had um, these really interesting points. And one of the biggest things about the Bowery is that at the time, this is no longer the case, but at the time, New York City had elevated trains. Now they still have elevated trains in Brooklyn, um, but New York had elevated trains. And the Third Avenue L, it was called EL, elevated train. Ironically, the Third Avenue L is the train that my grandfather used to take to his old job. But the Third Avenue L went straight through the Bowery. And because the train tracks were there, whether it was a sunny day or not, it was always dark.
Wow.
It was always dark in the Bowery. And that became a thing. It was like forever night in the Bowery
Dang, that's crazy.
until I want to say it was 1960 something when they took the L down, the elevated track down. But from like for literally 50, 60 years, it was forever night.
And
And
all
think
this
about
is,
what that does to your psychology. You know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, I get exactly what you're talking about. It's you feel like you're never going to come out. You're just there in the bottom, and it's kind of okay. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And so you've incorporated that into Rat City. Now,
Yeah,
getting into Rat City now, you are the first woman to write a Spawn comic,
yes.
and you're okay. So McFarlane, I've heard he's picky on who he picks to draw, who to write. When you get on his list, it's like working with James Gunn. He has his favorites. Once you get there, you're there. Uh,
I've told them I'm going to write this till you fire me. Like I'm just going to keep writing. I mean, I'm working on number 16 right now. I'm working on the script for 16 right now, and 12 comes out tomorrow. Um, and I'm going to keep writing until they fire me because I love the character. I was a fan of Spawn when it first came out in the 90s. Um, I think it's pretty incredible what Todd has done. I was
yeah.
being interviewed by the New York Public Library the other day, and one of the questions was like, "Why do you think Spawn has lasted as long as it has?" And I said because the characters evolved, the story has evolved. Like when Spawn 1, when Al Simmons is crawling himself out of hell, it's because I love Wanda. I have to get back to my wife. Um, but now Al's reason for being is so much different. It has evolved. Yes, he still loves Wanda. Yes, that idea of family and love and protection and connectedness is is still important to him, but that's not his immediate goal right now.
Yeah.
You know, and because I think that sometimes when you have a character that does not evolve, you're basically telling the same story over and over and over again.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on that. I mean, in right now, I mean, even I had the opportunity to talk to Jimmy Palmiotti, who's currently doing uh
Gunslinger.
Gunslinger. I mean, even the artist is doing the interior on that one. Oh, I
Yeah.
love the art on that too. Store, and that's the thing too. I like historic stuff. I like past. I like a lot. I'll be honest with you, I like a lot of the old stuff, like World War II, Civil War. In this part of the Gunslinger that we're seeing is a great story too. And I'm talking about like the whole Todd McFarlane thing. Like when Carlo Barberi got selected to start drawing for Spawn, he had did Deadpool for a period of time, and I've worked with him as well. And that's why I said, I mean, how was it? Like, okay, what was the process? Like, how did you give a story to him, or how did he find you? What was the story behind that?
Okay, so Jay Carlos, who's the line artist on Rat City,
Okay.
um, Jay is a Brazilian artist, and he is repped by another incredibly talented artist named Joe Prado.
Okay.
So New York Comic Con 2022, 2023, Thomas Healy, who is the editor-in-chief at Spawn, Thomas was talking to Joe Prado about maybe testing out some of the artists that Joe reps for
Okay.
Spawn. And in passing, he said, we're looking to expand things. Maybe do you know any writers that you would want to, that you think would be good? And Joe said, you need to go talk to my friend Erica. And so Thomas came by. We were chatting. And look, this job is full-time freelance for me, so I'm never going to say no to a job.
Yeah.
You know, so when Thomas came by, it's really, I know everybody talks about like at New York Comic Con or like San Diego Comic Con, everybody's wheeling and dealing. It's not really like that. You're making contacts and you're getting business cards, but it's
Yeah.
really difficult to try and conduct business at these shows, especially if I was tabling. So it's like, I'm trying to have a conversation with somebody, with one person, and while that's going on, I'm trying to like sell so it's rough. So it's not like, I can make a deal right there. But we exchanged cards and we talked, and he's like, I'd really love to see what you could do with a character like She Spawn or work on Scorched or something like that. And I was like, all right. So we started chatting after, like, New York Comic Con is in October, and then you have Thanksgiving, and then you have Christmas
Yeah.
and everything. And you genuinely, like, nothing actually gets done until end of January, February. So we finally got on a Zoom, and I pitched Thomas this idea of a veteran who was an amputee. My grandfather was an amputee and a veteran of the Army. My dad was a veteran of Vietnam. And this idea of what happens when somebody is given, when someone is given power that they deserve because they're a good person, but they don't really want. And also this idea of what happens when you're a hero and you come home and the world treats you like you're disposable. And that's kind of how my dad felt when he came back from Vietnam in 1969. And so I wanted to do a story about veterans. I wanted to do a story about technology. I wanted to do a story about what happens when the worst parts of capitalism take over, the worst parts of, humanity take over, kind of thing. So Rat City is basically if the bad guys kept winning.
Wow.
What would the world look like if the bad guys kept winning? You know what I mean? You've got giant corporations that own a piece of everything. So PTS is Pharmatech Solutions. That's the big
Yeah.
corporation. Not everybody realized, but PTS is also post-traumatic stress. So it's a
Nice.
double entendre there. But you have PTS, this everything company that has government contracts in every country, that kind of thing. You have people who are so poor that they basically brought back the tenements. So back in the 1800s, early 1900s in New York City, there were tenements, and they would literally you would have a building that would face the front of the street, and then the landlords would hide a second building behind it, and that second building got no light, barely any ventilation or whatever. So basically, in Rat City, they just crammed everybody in, and we took a little. In terms of the look, Shay and I had conversations about the look, and we wanted to talk about like Blade Runner, Fifth Element, where everybody's crammed in these tiny little places and stuff like that. So we wanted to sort of see that dirtiness. And one of the things is that you see pretty much everywhere there is graffiti everywhere, because when people feel oppressed, they need to express themselves, and that's expression. That's an expression of art. And in the graffiti, not in every issue, because I don't want people scouring every single issue, but in a lot of the graffiti, we have like little messages that are in there. Like we have little in jokes, or like a nickname for somebody, or something like that. Like in one of the issues, I believe it's issue number 10. In the background, the graffiti says "God hates us," and things like that. So we wanted to take this like dirtiness and grittiness, but not just on like a physical level, like cars on blocks, but on like an emotional level, like the way people feel inside. And it's a lot. It's a heavy book. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's a heavy book. There are some like really like funny moments, or at least I think they're funny. I think there's brevity to it. Peter Cairn, who is the deviant, who is the main character, Spawn. His best friend is a guy he was in the army with named Reese, and Reese is this giant hulking dude he's Welsh, and he's this giant hulking dude. And Reese's big thing is he's kind of like a stage 5 clinger, where like if he calls you and you don't answer, he shows up because he worries. Reese always worries, and it's this thing that we sort of like we play on. In issue number 2, Reese breaks into Peter's apartment because he called Peter the night before. Peter never answered, so Reese breaks in because he was worried. Reese's a partner is a character named Quinlan, and there was this huge blackout that happens. So the reason why it's linked to Al Simmons is that in issue number 300 and 301, Al Simmons detonated his necroplasmic suit in front of Violator, in front of Clown and an Angel, and that energy of heaven, hell, and the necroplasmic demon energy, Spawn energy, sort of created a shockwave that went across space and time. And so in New York in 2111, there is this huge power outage that happens. Yeah. And that's the shockwave that happened 100 years earlier.
Wow.
And that's where Peter gets his abilities. That's when everything changes, is this huge shockwave. So we tried to make it where you don't have to read 363 issues of Spawn to know what's going on. You can pick this up just knowing that 100 years ago, somebody set a bomb off, and that bomb, the shockwave from that bomb went across space and time and is now affecting 100 years in the future.
Dang, that's pretty cool how y'all did that. That's some crazy stuff.
So that was the way that we linked it to Al. And little by little, we're throwing in bits and pieces of the Al Simmons lore. We don't want, Jay and I never wanted this to be 100% removed from Al's story.
Yeah.
Because then it's not a Spawn story. Then it's just us with a character dressing up as Spawn. We wanted to make there be all these little nods that are slowly starting to accumulate and build more and more and more. And in issue 10, we introduce the character of the Curse, who was in the original Spawn series. So we automatically have a callback to the Curse. So there's now the Cult of the Curse. So 100 years later, that character of the Curse, has this cult following around him and around his beliefs and everything. And so that's where we link him back to that. In issue, I'm writing 16 now. In issue 14, we see a direct link in 14 and in 15. Like you see like a legit direct link between Al Simmons and Peter Cairn. But it's taken us, 14, 15 issues to get here, because we want to make sure that the people who are in this ride stay because they want to stay with Rat City, not because they're like, oh, this is, Spawn 2.0.
It's a different, I've read a couple of issues and I like the technology part of it. I like now knowing what you stated and the reason why behind it. I see it differently again because it's always been in the same thing, like with Punisher, all those were same premise. It was based off a character of what they were going through, and your story, how you tied it to your grandfather,
my dad and my grandfather.
It's reality, because that's, people can relate to that. People have had either a brother or sister who was in the military who lost a leg or lost an arm, and people can tie to that. But like you using New York as the background, I have never been to New York, mind you. I do have the New York Yankees hat. I'm a big Yankees fan.
Good.
It's on my bucket
I'm
list
glad
of
you're a Yankee fan because if you were wearing a Mets hat, I would have been like, I'm not doing this podcast. Freaking Mets fans.
No, I've been a Yankees fan for forever. I mean, I even have my little Turtles little bandanas right here. But yeah, it's on my bucket list to go. I mean, I've been to Emerald City, I've been to San Diego. I have not been to New York Comic Con. That is my bucket list of places to go. But knowing now that how much of the history that you're putting into Daredevil and to Rat City, it makes me see the comic so differently now. Now I'm gonna have to go back and look at it and read it again because I just thought it was a story that was being written because that's what we're used to. We're getting told stuff, and it's like, okay, that sounds cool, but knowing now it actually is true, has tie-ins to history, that even makes it more phenomenal for me to read. Um, and that's what
Yeah,
I've heard too.
issue 6 of Rat City like is I would say out of 20 pages, 15 pages is a history lesson.
Wow, that is cool. And that's why from what I've read about you and heard about you is that you everything that you do is researched. When it comes to the weapons you use in the fights, it's you research on it. And another person who does that is Gail Simone. Like when she wrote Batgirl, she literally researched, psychology and all these other things to write the story. And I feel when a writer does that, that shows you they're putting that passion into it and that love into that book because they want to make sure it's accurate and because anybody can bullshit on stuff, but
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
actually have that to back it up, it's even better. It makes it now knowing a lot of stuff too now. I'm like, wow, it makes you look at a difference for people guys who are listening to the podcast. So when you read these comics and you see these things about New York and it's historic, it's accurate stuff, that's awesome. I mean,
I know
okay.
people say that New York has too many superheroes and everything anyway, but I will say this. Um, when Edgar Salazar and I had done X-23 Deadly Regenesis, I have her in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Uh-huh.
For the record, I have never been to Minneapolis, Minnesota in my life. I did a lot of research online, and you mentioned TMNT because you have the Turtles.
Yeah.
Eric Burnham, who is a TMNT writer.
Yeah.
Eric lives in Minnesota, so I was asking him questions. But Forgotten Home, that story, when it's still on Earth, because the story goes, we go to another world in the story. But still on Earth, the story takes place in Montana. I've never been to Montana. I have researched Montana. I have gone to Google Planet, and
Wow.
all this other stuff. Yeah, I will. I'll say, you know what? That looks like a really cool road. Where is that? And I'm going to find a way to, work that in there one way or another.
See,
I
that's what
memorized the
makes
bus schedules on where to go from one place for the teenage girls to get to the mall. Like, is it plausible for
wow.
these girls to get to the mall, like riding the bus? I mean, I grew up in Jersey and New York where public transit is like literally every day. Like you're
Yeah.
riding public transit when you're 10 years old. So for me, before I got a car, well, I never actually had my own car. I mean, until I was well into my 20s. But like for me, like if I had to go to work at the mall, I would take the bus. So I know that not every place has the ability to take the bus to go to the mall or take the bus to go to the grocery store or whatever. I'm very, very fortunate that I've always lived in places with very, very good public transit,
Wow.
which helps because my husband and I only have one car between the two of us. So if he takes the car, I can take the bus to the bus 2 blocks away. I can take it to the grocery store. I can take it to the movie theater. I can take it to the mall. I can take it to the restaurant. Whatever. I'm right there. Um, so I had to research whether or not it was plausible for two teen girls to take a bus to the mall from where they lived. I
Wow.
found out it is. But like that's something like I wasn't good, that's something that I made sure of. I know that's so stupid, but you
No, I
know,
mean, and that makes it even more, you know, to really take in because yeah, anybody can write anything and make fake stuff up and that's why I feel that's why people gravitate towards the X-Men is because the purpose of the X-Men that was written back in the day was because of what was going on in reality, and
Yeah.
it was a different format. And I feel it's still going on to this day, where you mentioned right now, where Laura doesn't have to say she's a mutant because she looks normal, and it's kind of like us. Like, I'm Hispanic. I'm worried now because of what's going on. I mean, I'm an American citizen. I was born here, but
Yeah.
I fear
But
because
it doesn't matter, to be perfectly honest.
yeah,
It
and
doesn't matter.
that's why people gravitated to the mutants, because people could relate to the characters, because we're all different in some form or fashion. We're big, small,
Yeah.
and each of us, like, I've always been big, so I played football. But you've always had, like, you had skinnier people who couldn't do certain things, but each of us had an ability that we could bring to the table that the other couldn't. And that's
Yeah.
why I really gravitated towards, X-Men as well. But when you have writers like you putting that little things in there to tie to reality and
Well,
still
I
take us
will say this.
away.
There is something that's brewing. They haven't announced it yet, but you're going to see all of Laura's little hiccups and her little hypocrisies when it comes to being a mutant or being able to pass as a mutant.
Uh-huh.
They're going to add up,
Oh.
and you're going to see sort of it's kind of like they're just packing more and more baggage in. And then you're going to see the culmination of all of that. They haven't announced it yet. It's coming. But that's one of the reasons why I wanted to see that, like the argument, the situation with Polly, where
Yeah.
Laura's like, I'm not a mutant. And Polly's like, yeah, I know you're a mutant. I can see that you're a mutant. And Polly sort of outs her, kind of thing. There's Laura's back and forth with Luke Cage of what are you anti-mutant? What are you, mutant hater now, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Little thing. There's an interaction in the story arc with Bucky. There's all these like little things that we're putting in little by little by little, where you see Laura going hot and cold on the whole thing. And the thing is that Laura has the privilege to do that. She has the ability to do that. In issue number 1, when you see the character of Emery, who's a young woman about Laura's age, but she has blue hair and purple skin.
Yeah.
Emery doesn't have the privilege to say, I'm not a mutant. Emery doesn't have the ability to say, oh yeah, I'm just a normal person, going about my business, blah, 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 because she's purple.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So Laura can be as snarky as she wants about it. But the fact of the matter is, she can go home, she can go to bed, she can walk into a restaurant, she can walk into a movie theater, she can get it, not that she would, but she can get a job, she can do any of these things, and no one would be any of the wiser.
Yeah.
So that is a privilege that she does not always acknowledge. And you're going to see what happens when that builds and builds and builds and builds. You're going to see what happens with that, because it's not going to be pretty.
Oh. Wow.
Because I love Laura as a character, but she is by no means perfect. Same thing with Elektra. By no means perfect. And some people might get upset that I'm like putting Laura in her place. I'm not. I'm simply making her acknowledge.
I know exactly what you're doing. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I'm making her acknowledge that.
Yeah, so you're basically wanting her to understand that, hey, you've taken it for granted what you've got, but
100%.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm gonna have to wait 3 or 4 months now to find this out. Wow. Okay.
It'll probably be announced. I'm trying to think. It'll probably be announced like, I'm going through the numbers. It'll probably be announced like May, give or take.
Okay. 2 months. Okay, 3 months. Okay, that's not bad.
They'll talk about what's coming next, and then
wow.
Then you'll see like where Laura goes and how she has to confront this.
That is so cool. I mean,
yeah.
Now it makes me. I am so glad I got to talk.
I'm selling the books, man. I'm selling the books.
Well, I
I
mean,
got a
no.
mortgage. I got to sell the book.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, people who don't read, like, because when people come into the store, they ask me, "Hey, do you have something that's good to read?" And this is the thing about comics. You have some that
Yeah,
they're going to give you comics. The story and the art's not that great, but when you have the combination, and me and Jimmy talked about this, where when you have the artist and writer on the same page,
yeah,
that's a given. It sells because that writer, and it's hard because a lot of the time some artists and writers don't gel together. So, but when you find that artist you gel with, and it just flows, and that's the thing too. Like you mentioned, you've got all these artists from Brazil, from Turkey, from Mexico, from
yeah,
all over the world now, compared to back in the day when it was so close, where it was pretty much everybody here in the United States, because back then you had to fax, or
yeah.
not even fax, because it wasn't even fax. You would mail
You would
your
FedEx.
11 by
Yeah,
yeah, you would send that
yeah,
off, do your drawing, send it off to them, and they'll tell you, okay, here, we need to change this, change that. It was so crazy. Now everything is so, like, right now we can talk. You're in New York, and I'm in San Antonio, Texas, and you could have never done this years ago.
yeah.
Uh
It
so
would be a
it's
really expensive long distance call.
yes. But the thing is, it's changed. The world has changed so much, and
Yeah,
the opportunities for artists who, and that's one thing, I interview artists as well, because I want to hear their story, because some of these artists go to college, they get into college. So there's some that get turned down
yeah.
and don't make it into school, but they have that love, and they don't let that love die, and they keep on practicing. I mean, like, there was one artist who actually took Carlo Barberi's class that he did in Mexico, and now he is currently drawing comics as well, for like turtles and stuff like that.
That's
And
fantastic.
yeah, and that's the same thing with, like, you, when we were talking before we started recording. Guys, if you're dyslexic, and you have trouble reading,
Comics are great.
comics, yeah, and that's what we were talking about. Like, and you're able to write, like, I think that's one thing. I have great ideas, but I have trouble writing. But if it wasn't for comics, I don't think I would be able to read a lot of stuff I was able to. But and that's what kids need nowadays to turn to. And World War II, World War One, it's people would always turn to entertainment to take themselves away from reality.
They would
From the
always go to the
radios.
movies. Yeah, and radio
Yes.
shows. Yeah.
And that's where comics, I feel, is that it takes up that mantle, because it'll take them away from reality for however long it takes them to read that comic. And when you have great stories behind it, and stories that lead to something, or to try to explain something, that's even better. And
I have a
writers,
sorry, I have a nephew who's in college right now, and I send him comics all the time.
oh, nice.
Yeah,
So you're the
20-year-olds in
cool,
college, and I send him comics all the time.
so you're the cool Ann, huh?
I got a DM saying, "I'm very proud of you. I'm proud to say that you're my auntie." And I was like, "Oh, so sweet."
No, and that's why I like to get people like you on, and because, and even Jimmy told me in the interview, he's like, there's back in the day, like, some of the artists and writers, nobody really cared about them back then. And if you want to try to find an interview about a writer from back in the day who've already passed, you may find maybe a 2-3 minute clip. That's it.
Yeah.
Other than articles, there no one really documented their histories. And that's, he says, I wish we had other people, who had more interviews with, like, Kubert, and stuff like that,
No,
because we,
yeah.
you know and I'm interviewing Fernando Reese this coming Friday, who's doing, I'm a big Kevin Smith fan. So he's doing the crossover with Archie and Kevin Smith's Clerks. But same thing, he's teaching at Kubert School of Art.
I taught
And
with Fernando for 2 years.
oh, you did?
I taught at the Cube. I taught writing at this Cubert school for 2 years. Yeah.
Ah, that's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. A lot of people who don't know that Kubert schools exist, you know what I mean? Because this world's so big,
Yeah.
and if you have that passion and love, follow it. I mean, I know it's hard to say to do that, but that's what I want this podcast to be, is to have people who have that passion. Don't let it die.
I will say
Follow.
this, like anybody can write. Not everybody can do it well. Not everybody can do it professionally,
Yeah.
and even fewer people can do it and make a living at it. I I work very, very, very hard. I had a guy, had a podcaster say to me, "Oh, you're really lucky," and I was like, "Luck? Absolutely, luck has played a role. I'm not going to say that luck hasn't played a role, but I will say this: I've worked my ass off, and everybody, sees all the stuff that I'm doing with Marvel now, and they're like, "Oh, that's great. You've done all this stuff with Marvel." They're not talking about the book that I wrote in 2009, the spy thriller that I wrote in 2009,
Yeah.
or things like that. So there's a lot, and this is the other thing is you can do everything, and I put it in air quotes, right, and still not make it as a professional. And that is literally just the luck of the draw. But for me, the reason why I write, whether I was doing it as a profession or not, because I was working in a studio before I left to write full time. The reason why I write is because I have stories that I have to tell. So even if I wasn't writing full time, I would still have to journal. I would still have to write stories. I would still have to, do all of these other things because I have to make stuff. I mean, I'm literally weaving in the middle of this entire time I've been weaving this. I have to make stuff. I have to do stuff. I have to embroider. I have to do, and
Keep
that's
yourself
just my
busy.
person. I have to keep myself busy, and that's my personality. But if you're enjoying it, then it doesn't, it doesn't have to bring in money. If you're enjoying it, and that in and of itself, you doing it is giving you that satisfaction, is giving you that pleasure, then don't put the pressure on yourself to say, I've got to make it, I've got to write Spider-Man,
Yeah.
Superman, whatever. Um, because to be perfectly honest, I never set out and said I want to write Spider-Man or I want to write Batman. Those are two characters. I've written Spider-Man, and I had more fun writing Miles Morales than I did writing Peter. And I make jokes all the time about and I know I'm going to get fired for saying this, but like my dislike for Peter Parker.
Yeah.
Um, but like I know there's so many people like I've wanted to draw Spider-Man since I was a child and blah blah blah. Don't worry about Spider-Man. Spider-Man's covered.
Yeah.
I want the person who's been dreaming about writing Beta Ray Bill.
See, and I was gonna bring that up because my
Yes.
buddy, he's a hardcore, he's a Thor fan and a Better Ray Bill fan, and you wrote for Better Ray, and there's not many stories
I
out there.
10 pages. They let me write 10 pages on him.
So okay, now, I'm gonna keep you on too long. We're already at an hour. Okay, Better Ray Bill.
Yes.
Okay, how did you come up with that story when there's not much out there? I mean, there's some stories out there, but for the what you wrote for those 10 pages, I feel I don't know, I just feel
So
like he's a character that gets overlooked.
Bill, when you strip Bill down to the absolute skeleton, Bill is the Corbinite Captain America. He was a small, skinny alien, a small, skinny person who volunteered to be experimented on to become the best of his people to protect them.
Yeah.
Bill's the alien Captain America. So Bill and Steve are the same person.
Dang.
All right. And the one thing that they can both wield the Mjolnir. They're both
Yeah.
worthy. And that's even before the movie. Steve had been in the comics. Steve had had the hammer before. So it's not like I'm just getting that from the movie. No, Steve
Yeah.
had the hammer multiple times before. So one thing that Steve has, even as horrible as the world is, Steve still has hope.
Yeah.
So if Bill and Steve are the same character, then why wouldn't Bill have hope? And the other thing is that we don't know a lot about Bill's Corbinite physiology. Okay, we know that he's durable. We know that, like Thor, he can live many, many years. We know that he's extra strong, that he's all this other stuff. But we don't really know all that much. Would the experimentation that he went through, all the process that he went through, would that make him immune to things like a zombie virus? Would that make him, and if that's the case, then what do you do when you outlive everybody? You watch all of your friends, you watch all of your family, you watch everyone you love succumb to this. Because Thor is super strong, but he's not impervious. He's not invulnerable. You know? So I thought about it from another angle, is this idea of, so I love Yoda. As you can see, I have a portrait of Yoda behind me.
Nice.
That I have had since I was a child. My mother used to do illustrations, and an artist that she was friends with painted that for me as a child.
Oh, wow.
So I've literally had this for 45 years. It's one of those things where I never remember a time when it wasn't there.
Wow.
So Yoda's another character. Yoda, now, again, not everything is known about Yoda's people. The only other Yoda that we've seen is Grogu and Yaddle.
Yeah.
But Yoda is a character who was teaching so many people and outliving his students.
Wow. Yeah, that is true.
Think about it. So Yoda says in Empire Strikes Back, for 900 years I taught. Okay, if you taught for 900 years, then how old were you when you started teaching? Like
That's
400 years old?
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So think about all the people that have come and gone that he has seen, not just die because of battles, because, Jedi are warriors, but all the people that have come and gone simply from old age. Okay?
Yeah.
What do you have to look for? And then a third thing that came to my mind was Vandal Savage.
Oh, wow. You're putting from Justice League Unlimited? That's a great character.
There was a story on Justice League Unlimited where Superman gets sucked into a wormhole and they think that he's dead.
Yeah, I remember.
And Lobo takes his place on the Justice League, which is like bizarre. But what happens is Superman is still on Earth, but he's on Earth like 1,000 years into the future, and the only person that's still alive is Vandal Savage.
Yes. That was a great episode.
And because we polluted the world so much, the sun is a red sun, so Kal-El does not have his superhuman abilities because it's a red sun. So I thought about like how Vandal Savage, how his whole outlook on everything turned in that episode. So I thought about Yoda, I thought about Steve Rogers, I thought about Vandal Savage.
Wow.
I thought about, how is it that you can survive all of this and still find the strength to go on? And there's a point in that 10 pages where he is at his lowest. And if you haven't read it, it's in the Marvel Zombies anthology that came out in 2023, I think. There's a point in that when someone asks Ray, he said, Beta Ray Bill, are you okay? And he said, I miss my friends. I miss my friends. I miss the people that I love. Because he's outlived them.
Yeah.
And again, some of them died from battle and some of them died from old age. But either way, he has outlived them. And the person who asks him this says, but you can make new friends, right?
Wow.
And that gives him the hope. That one little line from this particular character gives him hope. And Nelson Daniel was the artist on that. And there's something that Nelson did in the art that when I saw it, I teared up.
Oh, dang.
It was this tiny little detail that just, it was genuinely so beautiful in the sense that like it captured the moment in such a way that everybody like, oh yeah, that's cool. But if you really look and you really read it and you stay in that moment, but you can make more friends, right?
Yeah.
You you feel what we were trying to get people to feel.
Yeah. I get you now. Yeah.
And I'm still dying to write more Beta Ray Bill. I would love to write more Beta Ray Bill. Please
Wait,
let me write more Beta Ray Bill.
and then okay, man, there's so much we ain't got enough time to go through everything. You've written for Darth Maul.
Yes,
You're telling me you love Star Wars. So,
I did. My
yeah.
mother was 8.5 months pregnant with me. She took my older brother to see it in the theater. I made a joke and said she should have had me in the theater. I was supposed to be born 2 weeks after she saw it. I was supposed to be born the beginning to mid of June. I ended up being born all the way at the end of June. It was the 70s. They let you bake for another month and a half. Nowadays, like 2 days after your due date, they're like, get that kid out. No, me, I baked in there for a while. But like I always made the joke that I was there and I saw the movie to my mom's belly button.
Wow.
But yeah, I've always loved Star Wars. Again, I don't remember a time that I didn't have this Yoda painted. So
I mean, okay, so you got Battery Bill, you got Yoda. I know you know your research. Can okay, because they're doing so much right now with Star Wars. Man, I could picture you writing the before the 900 years before when Yoda started becoming what he became. That would
I will
be
I will say this: Star Wars, the Star Wars IP is very very, I don't know, strict. Like if you look at the people that are writing for Star Wars, a lot of times it's the same people.
yeah,
They basically like they kind of vet you, and then if they like you, they keep like Greg Pak. I mean, I adore Greg. Greg is a phenomenal writer. He's writing like all. I mean, he's written tons of Hulk, including the Amadeus Cho Hulk.
yeah,
Um, but he writes a lot of Darth Vader and writes a lot of stuff for Star Wars. Charles Soule is another
yeah.
one. Writes a ton for Star Wars. I would love to write more for Star Wars. I think that the Darth Maul that we did with Leonard Kirk, who was the artist, I thought it was pretty damn good.
No, it was good. It was a
Um,
good run. I liked it.
I don't know what the deal is. I would absolutely love to work on more Star Wars, but the way it's hard to explain, but like the way the offices are kind of like partitioned off, like I can't have a conversation with like a Star Wars editor normally. Like because I'm in the X office writing for Laura and I'm in the Avengers office writing for Elektra and I used to write Moon Knight and things like that. I know these editors that I can turn around and be like, "Hey, blah blah blah, I'd love to pitch a Moon Knight or I'd love to pitch this and blah blah blah, whatever." Whereas with Star Wars, there's not that crossover. So like the Star Wars editors are the Star Wars editors. Whereas in the Marvel office, it's like you could be an editor on on the cosmic stuff. You could be Beta Ray Bill's editor at one point, and then you're an Avengers editor a couple of years later, or you're an X editor a few years later, whatever. There is rotation there, where I don't feel that there's rotation in the Star Wars office.
I got you.
Or at
Got
least
you.
that's how I've felt, and that's how kind of it was explained to me. So I would love to turn around and say, let's see Yoda becoming a knight.
Oh, that
You
would
know,
be.
that is like, and is that 2,000 years ago? Is that like we know that he taught for 900 years. So, but when was he thought of to be a knight? Because Grogu is 50 years old and he's a toddler.
Yes.
So if Grogu's 50 and at possibly the age of like, let's say a year and a half, 2 years old, then you got to be like 15 before you become a knight. So what's the equivalent of 15 for Yoda? Is that 250 years?
Yeah.
You know, like
Okay.
there, you could do the math, but I'm not as great as math. But like you could literally sit down and do the math. Okay, so if you know 18 months equals 50 years, then what does 15 years equal in that
Yeah.
timeline? Because then you turn around, Yoda's going to outlive his own teachers. He's going to
True.
outlive he's unless they pay. I mean, how many masters did Yoda have? Think about it.
Exactly.
If
So many
Yoda is a
questions.
Padawan, if Yoda is a Padawan, let's say, and I'm making these numbers up. Let's say when you're a Padawan, you're a Padawan for like 5 years,
Yeah.
and I could be wrong, but let's just say 5 years. For Yoda, that 5 years might be like 40 years. Does that mean he's outliving his masters? Has he had more than one master?
Dang.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, but think about it. Think about you have
No.
one
Yes.
master and you get really attached to this master. This is the first master you have, and then die in battle or die of old age. And then you get a second master who's still very good and teaches you things, but has a completely um, different spin on things and has a different teaching technique. And does that make you question whether you want to be a Jedi? Because now you've got this new person who is still really capable, still really good, but they're not gelling with you like your master, your mentor. Do you start resenting this new master? Do you
Wow.
go to the council and say like, "Look, I need a new one. This guy's not great." Like, do you know what I mean? And there's a huge
Yes.
power dynamic. There's a power balance there, and we saw that between Anakin and Obi-Wan when Anakin would be, and even with Ahsoka and Anakin, where there would be this pushback, but in
Yes.
the end, Anakin would pull rank and Obi-Wan would pull rank, and I'm sure when Yoda was a master to Dooku, Obi-Wan, Mace Windu, like all those Jedi that we know, I believe Tieto Mundi, probably Kit Fisto, like all these Jedi, like did Yoda allow anybody to give him any guff? You
Yeah.
know, or did
That's
they
true.
just say, "Yo, this is Yoda. This man has seen everything. Whatever he tells
Yeah.
you, because every contingency he has seen it all the way through." Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. Oh man. You got me thinking so much now because it's like I've read the novels prior to before it wasn't canon and stuff like that. And the blood ties where Boba Fett, you know, trained Han's daughter to fight her brother. I mean, those are great
It
books.
was Jalen,
Um,
right?
yeah.
Jalen, yeah.
So those were great books because it was at that time we had no movies, we had no TV shows, so we had to have something to turn to. But yeah, that's another thing. That's another pot. I don't want to take more of your time because I mean we're already going almost an hour and 30 minutes.
All right,
But
all right.
no, I don't want to take your time. I mean, I know you're busy. I mean, because you're still writing the current stuff, and I think you said you
Yes.
were almost done. Is there
I'm
any
I'm
upcoming
writing I'm
project?
writing Rat City. I'm currently writing Rat City. I have to make a revision to a script for Laura because I had a
Oh,
conversation with my editor today, so I have to make a quick revision to the Laura script. And then I've got I've got the other thing that's happening that they're probably going to announce in a couple of months,
wow.
and then I have another thing that I'm working on with a completely different publisher, like completely like nothing to do with superhero stuff, totally different. Um, but I'm working with an editor who I've worked with in the past, who I absolutely adore. He is phenomenal editor. Like he's also an illustrator and an artist himself. So like when he
Oh,
looks at
wow.
art and he gives a crit on the art, like he knows what he's talking about. He's not. Some editors are really like they'll look at the art and they don't really know what to look for. He knows what to look for, and I've worked with him a million times before, and just every time I work with him, it's just if I say his name, then everybody's going to know exactly what I'm working on. But just know that I've worked with him before, and he's great, and I adore him, and I'm really happy to be working with him again.
So I will put the links to your Blue Sky and Instagram, and I know um, if you do have the stuff once you can announce it, share it with me. I will share it
I absolutely
on
will. You will
on a social.
you will see. I will be blasting social media.
Nice.
Everybody saying, "I'm writing this," and everybody's gonna be like, "What? Aren't you the person who writes Electra like snapping people's necks?" Yes, but
um,
so
but I want to thank you again for taking the time to come on the podcast and talk. I mean, I feel we can go into other stuff because I also want to talk about your Star Wars stuff. I mean, there's so much stuff to talk about, and I know you're busy. Um, but definitely, guys, go follow her if you hadn't been reading these comics, and now you know more about how much history is put into this, some of this stuff. You're gonna enjoy it even more because, like I said, now I'm gonna go back and read issues 1 and 2 because I thought it was cool what I was reading, but now I want to go back and it's like watching Doctor Who. You watch Doctor
Google
Who and
Dutch
then you go,
Fred.
yeah, exactly, yeah, to
Google
find
Dutch
out about
Fred
that.
and find out who Dutch Fred is. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go and look up that because I mean, like I said, like the Doctor Who thing, you watch the whole series, you go watch it again, and you miss things that you had missed when you first watched it, and that's how I feel right now about these issues. So I'm gonna have to go back and read them. Hey, countdown to the Geekcast. Thanks again. Go like and follow, and see you next time.
Peace.